So according to a human behavioral study, the average person tells a lie at least once or twice every day. So how does one deal with an untruthful colleague, especially if their lies can impact how one is viewed at work? Our next guest is a master life coach and human lie detector, Lizette Volkwyn, the author of the book Finding Me. She joins us now to share some of her expertise and some advice for dealing with this potentially stressful situation insofar as it relates to the workplace. Lizette, thanks very much for your time on the AM Report. I'm going to ask you not to ask me any questions since we've dubbed you our human lie detector for the purposes of this interview. So I want to begin with this. So the average person will perhaps say, you know, I am quite an honest person, but statistics tell us that even that person tells at least one or two lies every day.
Good morning, Michelle, and thank you for having me. Indeed, you know, the sad reality is that every 10-minute conversation, even the most honest person will either tell a white lie or withhold information, which makes us all liars.
Yeah, that is quite an interesting statistic there. So you've mentioned the issue of a white lie. So take us through that. What are the kinds of lies that people are telling in just everyday conversation? They're not life damaging, but they're untruths.
Very true. You know, you get the white lie, which I just mentioned, and then you get also withholding information is also a lie. Yeah. And then obviously you get your blatant lie, which is just hardcore lying. Yeah. And the reason why we do white lies is that we all live in a society where we want to be acceptable and approachable. And we don't always want to tell everybody about what's happening in our life because we want to impress. And that is when we start going into this mannerism of withholding or giving that white lie of, I'm okay, I'm fine, but in reality we are breaking inside. Now, just for the record, you know, you only lie for two reasons. You only lie for pain, to avoid it, or to gain something out of it.
And who are the people, according to this kind of behavioral study, who are the people who are more likely to lie for personal gain?
Well, literally anybody. Because we have to understand it's about the severity of the gain and the severity of the pain, why we will lie. So any person, when you look at it, if you know you're going to lose your job, which you are absolutely desperate to have, you might lie about the reason why you didn't attend the sales meeting or the financial report, why you didn't put it in. And that is where we start looking at to avoid the pain of losing our jobs. But then we look at the gain as well. So when we're in a relationship or a new relationship where we want to start impressing that partner or the new person in our lives, we don't really want to tell them all about our past because the gain of having this wonderful person in our life is so much bigger.
So you're talking about lying by omission?
Yes, absolutely.
So at what stage, if we bring the discussion back to the workplace, at what stage do I address an issue when it comes to, let's say, a colleague who has a track record, in my experience, of lying, and that kind of lie is beginning now to impact my own work environment?
You know, socially, we want to believe and trust everyone we interact with. So our first engagement with that type of person would be, I'm going to trust you, I believe you, you will not be lying to me. Unfortunately, when it comes to the second stage and the reputation has preceded this specific colleague, start an audit trail and a paper trail as soon as possible. By that I mean, when he sends you a WhatsApp or she sends you a WhatsApp, keep that record. When you start emailing and asking for information or sending information, keep the paper trail. The reason for that is the moment I do that, a liar cannot manipulate facts, but they can manipulate emotions and your credibility if there's nothing to actually carry that information.
Right. So you're saying if I'm going to address an issue like this in the workplace, it's not something that you can become emotional about as the person who's reporting the behavior. you should base your complaint on the facts on the table.
Very much so. I'm a firm believer that we can only move forward and actually stand our ground when we park our emotions. And I'm not saying don't feel the emotion, don't feel the anger. What I'm saying is just park it for a moment and just deal with the facts. Because the liars are depending on you to get emotional and start looking erratic and out of control so that the blame can be shifted and it's not reflected on him or her.
Yeah, that's very interesting indeed. So there's a topic here in the research pack that I've got about our conversation around normal liars, and it's what you described at the beginning of our conversation, you know, the kinds of white lies that you tell if someone says, how are you? And actually your life's falling apart, but you say, I'm fine, thank you. How are you? So those are the normal liars. And then there are the prolific liars. Now, you've said that some lies are told either to avoid pain or to gain. Who are the people who are lying for neither of these reasons and seemingly without anything to gain or any pain to avoid? The stories perhaps that they are telling are just untruths, and that's it.
You know, Michelle, I have to bring you back. You have to understand whoever lies for two reasons. Pain or gain.
Okay.
So if you're really talking about someone who's going to lie for absolutely, and I'm talking about the pathologic liars who literally just want to lie every single time they open their mouth. But when you look at someone who are lying to you in a work environment with the idea to embezzle or whatever, you need to know the gain is still greed. The gain might be to have an affair. The gain might be to gain something out of reputation or status. So those liars continue to lie because they find gain out of it to see how far they can push people before they are caught. It's like a game for them. It's a psychological game which they are presenting to you.
So the stats are actually quite staggering when it comes to prolific liars, isn't it? The stats I have here, the prolific liars tell 5.5 lies for every one white lie told by a normal person, and then the other stat is 19 lies for every one big lie told by a normal person.
And it's scary, you know, if you look at that and you think, what is happening with society? But those liars do have some sort of pattern, and if you start being very tentative and aware of how people talk, and you know, it's very simple to start picking up on those prolific liars. You pick up on the conversation, and you only need to have 1 or 2 conversations with these people and just cross-check those facts which they are throwing around to impress you. And you will pick up some of the parts does not add up. You know, and I always have a saying that if the conversation doesn't add up, something is being withheld, and I need to investigate.
So we introduced you as a human lie detector, and you know, we've often heard stories about when police are questioning someone in relation to an incident that they are looking, in terms of behavioral psychology, they're looking at, you know, which direction you look at, whether you turn your head left or right when you're answering a question, to see whether you're lying. Is that true?
It is a very fine entry-level tip of the iceberg technique. I have done Dr. Paul Ekman's science on human lie detection, and if I call the real scientific title is a truth and credibility consultant.
Right.
Your subconscious mind has over 20 tells which no one has ever control over. And I'm talking up right to the level of psychopaths, which don't have that control. So when I would, for instance, start lying, and I would say, I'm having a great time tonight with my friends, my shoulder just lifted without any control over it, which is telling my conscious mind, I don't believe a word you are saying.
Yeah.
And so we have all these different tells which changes. And the moment when we are aware of that, those tells are always telling us where to go and look to create an hypothesis of the truth versus the lie.
That is very, very interesting indeed. So let me ask you this. If I were to read up on the psychology of lying, and I study what the different tells are, these subconscious things that we do, as you've just described it, I read up on that, I try to educate myself, and I'm in a situation where I have to simulate telling the truth. Would that work?
No, not at all. Believe it or not, we were just over 29 candidates when I done my practical in Manchester. And we were 27 different nationalities. And I have to add, we were only 5 either psychologists or coaches. The rest were intelligence services. And for those 2 to 3 weeks, we knew exactly what we need to tell the truth or to convince the lie. And not one of us could actually get it right to lie to the group without them picking it up. And the reason being is, and you practice, and you say, I'm going to convince myself this is the truth. I practice the whole story out of my head. But the moment you start telling the story, for instance, when there's a lie intact, and I mean, you can't go every night and say, hubby, please tell me where you were today, and try backwards.
Right.
Because you cannot tell a lie story, for instance, backwards. And if you go backwards, it would not make sense. There will be steps missing. But when you tell it truthfully, forward, it will be correct, or backwards. And that is the things we are looking at. But your subconscious mind will always betray you.
So incredibly interesting. Lizette, thank you so much for joining us this morning on the AM Report for what was a very, very interesting discussion. Lizette Volkwyn is a Master Life Coach and author and human lie detector, be warned. Thanks very much indeed.